And I'm going to share my whole display with you guys as well. Okay, we get to start with the infinite loop, so that's fun. Okay, so if there was an issue with any of it, like any of it was difficult for you, you couldn't figure out the response, then just dig up your code from somewhere, wherever you saved it to, and follow along that section. Otherwise, you can just watch. We'll go through this pretty quickly. I'm going to pop over to Windows here, and there's Unit 1, so I said you guys can just build right on top of this. I also said that I recommend duplicating this folder and turning it into a Unit 2 folder. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm just going to duplicate that and then go away. Rename this new one to Unit 2. And then go on in here. So, so here's the zip file that I used to show that, here's how you submit this. We don't need that. And I guess I've forgotten what my directory structure was. This actually isn't my demo file folder. This is actually my demo folder, so I'll go ahead and rename this guy now. There we go. And back on last Wednesday, a week earlier than today, a week ago today, we created the directory structure. We created an index.html. We still haven't dealt with any CSS. Maybe we'll get around to that this Friday. I promise we will at some point. Inside JS, let's see if I've got an index.js. I do. Huzzah. So let me go ahead and get this open in Chrome, which is what I like to use. And then Control-Shift-I, bring up the console. And there's already some stuff being spat out to the console here. I don't think that it interferes at all with the Unit 2 stuff. If it does, you can always just comment it out. And let me go ahead. I'm not going to mess around with the HTML at all. I'm just going to go right to the the JS and go ahead and open this in code. And then I can close these other guys here. Okay, good. So yeah, like if you didn't want to see this stuff, then you can always just put this into a big multi-line comment and just get rid of that. There's a little comment I made for myself for getting the pi symbol on Windows. So let's see. So there were 4 sections in here, not including the coding challenge at the end. There's variables, cutting strings, escape, add, interpolate, and numbers and dates. So this is all chapter 3 stuff. So the first part, and I like to leave myself little comments. If I've got clear sections, then I'll go ahead and do that. So this first one is variables. And I suppose I could leave a comment for myself like, yeah, this is the first Friday lab too, but I think this will be plenty. Okay, so I've got the instructions up on another screen here that I'm reading from. 1, declare a variable named A with no initial value assignment. So this is the easiest one. I would use let A, and that's it. So this is something that may be different to you if you got if you worked with a different scripting language, that you can declare an uninitialized variable without a data type or anything like that. Let's see. So that's number 1. Number 2, declare a variable. Oh, by the way, there's another way that you could do this. You could do var a. They're very similar to each other, but with some differences in scope and so on that we may talk about later on, or we may not get to. But for most things, I recommend using let at this point. It was introduced in 2016, and it's been a godsend ever since then. Okay, number 2, declare a variable named MSG. Assign this variable the string hello world. Okay, so let message MSG equal, and then hello world. Oops, I used a single quote there. There we go. I'm trying to remember to put semicolons in here when I'm doing these reduxes, even though I've gotten thoroughly out of the habit of using those lately. Okay, so these are the first 2 points. Very easy to get. The next section is called cutting strings. And write a script that splits MSG string at the comma space. And so it's one of the string methods that was introduced somewhere in the middle of chapter 3. I can't remember exactly what page it is, but you could do, let's see, does it say log the result of the console. So you don't even need to like store this in a variable if you don't want to. Won't like take any points off if you do, but you don't need to. You just do console.log, and then this is going to be, the string is stored in the message, and the method is called split. And whatever you put into the quotes in here as the first and only argument is where it's going to split that string. So I want it to split on the comma space, and what it'll do is it'll create an array with 2 items in it, hello and world, and the comma and space will disappear. So I'll just put comma and space in there. And let me go ahead and save this and pop over to the browser and check the work. It's a good idea to check as you go. And there it is. So it's returning an array with hello and world. You might say, oh, the comma space is right there, but that's not what it is. It's just, this is a separator for the 2 items in the array. Okay, so that was number 1 of cutting strings. Number 2 of cutting strings, declare a variable named contents. Okay, I know how this one starts. That contents. Assign this variable the inner text of the document, which you can retrieve with document.body.innerText. So this is the part that we hadn't learned before and is not in chapter 3, which is why I gave you the actual code to get this done. So let contents equal document.body.innerText. So this is something that I'm planning on for this Friday, is that we'll learn more of these DOM operations, like how to query selectors on the document, or query all selectors on a document, and get an HTML collection or a node list back and do various operations with it, change the content, change the style, and so on. I don't know. We'll see. I think that it'll segue nicely into doing loops and conditionals and so on. But this is one of the ways of getting just the text content of a document. I hesitate to say text content because there is another property that's called text content, which does something similar but not quite the same thing. In this case, inner text is definitely what we want because it yields a simpler result with fewer indications of carriage returns, new lines, and so on. So let's go ahead and save this and just pop over to the browser and take a look here. What do we call it? Contents, right? So contents is not defined. Did I refresh this? There we go. So this is what it does. Both text content and inner text, they both will retrieve the text content of the entire page without the elements and the attributes and so on, and just give it to you in here. But there are these little escape strings, these escape sequences indicating new lines where they happen. So instead of saying, oh yeah, this is an H1 and this is an H2 or whatever, it just puts a new line indication in there. Think about it like this. If you were to take this stuff right here in the web browser and copy it and paste it into like Notepad or something like that, it would be a result pretty similar to this, except that it would actually like render those new lines instead of doing the escape strings. So anyway, that's that portion of it. That was a gimme because I gave you the text, or I gave you the code to do it. That was number 2. Number 3. Oh, and write. I left out the word write. Go to the browser console and write a script that tells you what position in the content string is occupied by the first instance of a new line escape character. I'm sorry about that sentence. I really tried to find a simpler way to say it, and I couldn't come up with anything. Hopefully I will at some point. But this is another one of those methods on strings that's given to you in chapter 3. And so the idea behind this number 3 is to find which, well, we already know the first character is at position 0, and then we want to find out where is the position of this first new line character, the \n there. And we can do that with this string method. So this is going to be a substring. No, I'm sorry. We're doing, hang on a second. I've got my notes all in a bind here. So yeah, we're doing substring in a second here, but we have to do index of before we do that. So that's how you find that position in there. So it's going to be contents dot index of, and then inside quotes here we want to find out where's the first place that this \n happens. So \n here, and then you can see it even before you hit enter in this browser. At least it tells you what the return value is going to be. So context.index of, and then \n, which is the new line character, and it's at position 41. So now we will use the substring in order to pull that, just this first phrase, as it were, out of this whole mess of a string here, and log the value to the console. So it's another one of these console.log. And this is going to be not message, but contents dot substring. And then what you do with the substring is you give it two values, where the starting position is and where the ending position is. And if you can give it those two integers, then it will pull the string out of the larger string. So contents.substring, first character is at 0, last character we just found out is at 41. And let's go over here and refresh. And there it is. So it gets the first one out of those. Let's go ahead and bring up contents so you can compare the two. So here's the 0 characters, that I, and then the last character is at the position 41. So it just took that section between 0 and 41 and pulled it out as its own string. Notice, by the way, a string is a primitive value, which means that it is not mutable. It's not changeable. So I can add to the string in various ways that involve basically a reassignment. It basically involves a new value. But I can't actually change that string itself. So I've just done a substring. And if you're not used to that, you might think, oh, okay, well, this is the new string. But it's not. The old string contents remains completely unchanged, and we are able to access it at any time. Yeah, but this is the new substring. Now, some of you might have noticed that there's also there's another substring, which is just substir. Is that not right? I thought that was right, substir, but it's giving me a little slash through it saying that's not right, or else I'm not using it right or whatever. Anyway, substring is the one that I tend to use. There are some differences between the two, but in this case, there really wouldn't be any difference between the two. So it's interesting. I wonder what I'm doing wrong. Oh, I'm not. It's working. Huh. I don't know why it's giving me a slash through there. Anyway, I don't think there would be a difference between the two in this case. So substring 0 and 41. So that's number 3 under cutting strings. Next up, any questions so far, by the way, or any of these that were challenging for you? Okay, cool. This is the section called escape, add, interpolate. And this is more string stuff down here, really. So number 1 underneath this section, declare a variable named Superman. With initial value, oh wait, declare, yeah, okay. Initial value, it's a bird, it's a plane, but then I gave the instruction that you need to write the string using single quotes. So not double quotes and not the backtick quotes, but use single quotes. It's a bird, it's a plane. Like so. So the trouble with that is that these apostrophes in here are also the same thing as single quotes. So it thinks that this is a string and that this is a string, and all this stuff in between should be identifiers that it knows something to do with, like names of variables or whatever, but it does not know what those things are. I'm getting unexpected identifiers and so on. So what you have to do, if you're going to use single quotes with apostrophes in there, you have to use an escape sequence. So put a backslash in front of each of the single quotes that are inside the quote, and then the interpreter knows to ignore those and just render those as part of the string. So if I go over here and refresh, the error goes away, and if I want the return value of Superman, there it is. All right, so that's number one. Number two, declare a variable named pirate. Pirate equal an initial value of RRR. Use concatenation to then add the text mateys to the end, logging the result to the console. So here's the initial value, and we're going to do a console.log. Pirate, and then the concatenation here is to use the plus. So I think it's probably the same thing in C++, but it might be dots instead. If you use PHP, then concatenator is a dot instead. JavaScript overloads the plus symbol as both an addition operator in math and also a concatenation operator with strings. And then what did I tell you to add on to the end of this? Mateys. So comma, mateys, exclamation point. Go over here and refresh. There it is. And number three, under escape, add interpolate is the what's up doc one. So let's see here. What did I ask for? Declare a variable named profession with an initial value of doc. Use a template literal to interpolate the value of profession, which is doc, into a resulting string of what's up doc, logging the result to the console. Okay, so yet another console.log. As you can see, we do a lot of these. It's basically your best one of your best debugging tools is just to log stuff to the console so you can see what the value is. Even if you forget to clean this up and leave some console.logs in there that don't have to be there, the users will never see them, will never know that they're there. So it's not an issue. That's a way better than using like an alert or something like that, because then the users will know that they are there if you forget to take them off. Okay, so a template literal is just a string with backticks, but it's got special properties in that you can interpolate the value of a variable or even a function return within a string itself. This was introduced in 2016, and before that we had to use like this kind of thing, which is the, my brain just concatenation, that's it. So this concatenation, and also with older strings in JavaScript, you can't have like a multi-line string. Neither with a single or double quote, you simply can't do it unless you put the escape sequences in there and just leave it all in one string. So this was a serious problem and this is fixed with the backticks, the template literal. You can have a multi-line string, no problem, which makes it a lot more useful for templating HTML. And then also the interpolation, which is the really cool part of it. There's also tagged template literals, which I don't know if we're going to, yeah, maybe we'll do that if you guys remind me right after this. But console.log, and then the template literal inside of here. And so this is the what's up doc. Notice that I don't have to do an escape sequence here with a single quote because these are backtick quotes. And then you don't want to just do this, right? You want to grab the value of profession. And so here's what you would have to do with regular quotes. If this were a regular string, I'll use double quotes so that we don't have to worry about that apostrophe. We'd have to do plus profession. And there's nothing wrong with doing it that way. That's perfectly fine. But then, there's a question mark at the end of it. So then I'd have to do another one and put the question mark in there, and it's starting to get a little bit unwieldy, right? So that's when the beauty of the template literals come in. So use the backticks like this, and then to interpolate the value, put a $, followed immediately by those curly braces. And then you can put profession in right here. And then you need to put the question mark after that. You just put it right there, still inside of the quotes. So, what's up, profession? To me, that's a lot easier to read. Sometimes it doesn't do make any difference. Sometimes it seems like, oh, well, I might as well just interpolate this because it's just about as easy. But a lot of the time, this is going to be pretty helpful. And then, like I said, when it comes to HTML templating, which is why this is called a template literal, this is king. So let's see, what's up, profession? And then I go over here and refresh, and there it is, what's up, doc, and it works. Okay, so the tagged template literals. There's more to it than just this. It has to do with making an array of values and then interpolating them into the string. But one of the things that's interesting about the tagged template literals is that they immediately follow a function. You don't actually need to put the parentheses around them. You can just do it like this, which you cannot do with any other kind of string. Let's go ahead and make sure I'm right about this. I'm going to save and refresh over here and there. But see, it returns something different. This is why I'm saying there's more to it than this. There's more to it than just spitting out a value like this. And maybe when we talk about functional programming, maybe we'll have a chance to take a look at this because it's actually pretty cool beans. But for now, let's just go ahead and leave it at the templating. And then plus, like we were saying, you can have a multi-line string, no problem. And it even put all of those new lines in there, which actually I didn't realize that it was going to do, so that's kind of cool. But I should have realized. That makes sense. Okay, so anyway, that is number 3 of the escape, add, and interpolate. Numbers and dates is up next. So the textbook didn't go very much into dates and so on. But it does go into numbers a little bit. So declare a constant this time. So instead of using let or var to declare a variable, you're going to use the const keyword to declare a constant, which is, it's basically it's like a variable, but the value is not supposed to change. Now, I'm hesitating and hemming and hawing because it's not quite true. If you have a mutable value, like an object or something like that, assigned to a constant, that object is still mutable. You can still change stuff inside that object, but the constant will always refer to that object if that's what you assign it to. So it's never going to be like reassigned to something else or have like the type changed or anything like that, like a variable will do. Okay, so constant with an initial value of pi. So I called mine pi. It wouldn't hurt if you did this for reasons we'll talk about probably tonight. Even though there is a pi object in JavaScript, it's a property of the math object. So you could do something like this, const pi equals math pi dot pi, and that's not going to cause a collision. But just to make things clear for myself, I did it like this instead. It's conventional to capitalize, do all caps for constants, although it's not required. But I think in any development team you work with, they're going to be expecting to see this. If they ask you to make it constant in JavaScript, probably they're going to want to see it like this just because that's the way everybody does it. So const pi, P-I-E, equals. And you could do whatever you wanted to here. I mean, there is a math.py, which is what I used for this, and that is discussed in chapter 3. So this is kind of what I was expecting. But if you couldn't find it in the chapter and you just said, heck, I'm just going to do like 3.1416 or something like that, that's fine. I certainly wouldn't take any points off for that, or 1.14 even, or whatever. But I'm going to do math.py. Let's go ahead and just bring it up in the browser just so you can see it. Math.py, and there it is, rounded to the nearest, what, 14, 15 characters, something like that. Okay, so we've declared a constant with an initial value of pi. Write a script that rounds the value down to the nearest integer and logs it to the console. Here's our old friend console.log. And one of these methods that is attached to numbers, the number object. So in this one, it is rounding it down is floor. Now in this case, doing pi.round would also work because it rounds to the nearest integer. Is that right, or does it round up? Let's see. Let's check it out. Save this, and I'm going to refresh. And pi.round is not a function. And why is that not working? Oh, of course. I always do this. This is one of my biggest mistakes, along with like forgetting like commas and objects and so on. I always want to put the variable containing the number here and then attach this as a method, but it doesn't work like that. You do the math object, the parent object, dot round, and then put your variable in here. I guarantee that's not the last time you guys will see me make that error. It's just something I do. Okay, so there we go. So yeah, it did round it down. So if you did this one, then that's perfectly fine. There's also math.floor. What am I doing? Which specifically will round down instead of rounding up. So if pi had happened to be like 3.7 something and you did math.round, it would have rounded it up instead. But no matter what you did, no matter what number it is between 3 and 4, math.floor will take you down, round it down to the nearest integer below that. And that is going to be relevant for the coding challenge, which we'll do in just a second. Okay, number 2 under numbers and dates is date. Declare a constant with a new date object as its initial value, and log the value to the console. So this is another constant, so we'll do another const keyword, and whatever you wanted to call it, equals new date. There's not much that's gone into about dates in that chapter. I think it's got a more extensive section on dates later on in the textbook, but it did have this little piece of text in there, or this little piece of code. So now it equals new date, and then log the value to the console. I go over here and refresh, and there is our current date time stamp right there. I should point out that the timestamp will not get reconfigured every single time or reassigned every time that this page loads. Basically, this is stored in, or actually it might every time the page is loaded. I'm not sure. I'd have to check that. But basically, when the script runs, this is going to record a timestamp at the moment where this part of the script runs through, and then that's going to be it. It's not going to continue to in fact, that is correct. When the page reloads, it will rerun the script, of course. But like if I continue to write like nowish, like I think, okay, so cool. I want to see what time it is now. Now that the page has been loaded for a couple of minutes, and it's not going to do that for me. It's going to give me exactly the same time as it was before. And in 5 minutes, if we do the same thing, it'll give you the same time.
I'm sorry I'm late. I thought the class was at 7.
No problem. Let me know once we get into lab so I can get you on the roster. But right now, I'm just going over the Friday stuff from last week.
Okay.
So we'll get to the new stuff in a moment. Okay, so no questions about anything so far? All right, cool. Let's get to that coding challenge at the end here. So when I give you coding challenges, whenever you see a coding challenge anywhere, I think it's usually expected that you can look online, you could look for answers, you can check Stack Overflow to see if there's been anything posted there, you can look up MDN tutorials, what have you. But even if you just like took the text of this question, of the extra question, and like pasted it into a Google search or Bing search, or certainly if you pasted it into like ChatGPT or something like that, it could probably at least get you going in the right direction. So it's write a script that returns a random integer between 0 and 10, inclusive, meaning including 10, and logs the value to the console. So yeah, I actually meant to write between 1 and 10 inclusive. So now that I think about it, there's actually a number of ways that you could code this depending on how you interpreted the question. So let's do the simple one first. And this is going to be, I guess we'll do, yeah, logs the value of the console. So we'll put it in the console.log. And math.round. So what this has to do with is taking a value and returning that value to an outer function. This is one of the things that JavaScript is really good at. So the simple solution to this is if you want to round the value of math.random. So here's what's going on here. So math.random, let's go ahead and go to the browser and check this out. Math.random will pick a random number, but what it does is it picks a random number between 0 and 1. That's the way that it works. I mean, they could have easily chosen to do 0 and 100, but instead they did 0 and 1. So it's always going to be some floating point number between 0 and 1. So what I asked for was an integer between 0 and 10. And so what we're going to have to do is take that random number and multiply it by 10. So instead of just doing math.random, let's do math.random times 10, like this. And now I'm getting numbers in between 0 and 10, like this, right? So not just between 0 and 1, but I'm also getting 8.1, I'm getting 2.8, and so on, and also some that are less than 1, right? So what I want to do now is I want to turn those into integers, and so that's where the math.round comes in. So let's say I do math.round, and then inside of that, we'll do the math.random times 10, like this. And so there, now we're getting nice, even, neat little integers. There's 8, there's 2, and so on, and things are looking good. So when you want to find out if something's working the way that you want it to, just run it through a bunch of times. And the way that I asked the question was not the way I intended to. The way I asked the question, you'd actually be fine with this. Because this will give you, between, yeah, it'll give you between 0 and 1. So the more complex version here, so let's go ahead and get that finished. So times 10. So there it is. So every time I refresh the page, it's giving me between 0 and 10. So what I was thinking about doing instead was doing between 1 and 10, which is, I think, what most people would expect. Like if you talk to most non-coders and say, yeah, give me a random number up to the number 10, they're probably not going to think about including 0 with that. Only a programmer is really going to think about including 0. So you might be tempted to do something like this. Times 10 plus 1. The trouble with that is that now we've got 2 of them, right? It's the second number we're looking at. It'll give us, it will not give us a 0 anymore, because it always has to be plus 1, but now it'll go up to number 11. There we go. I zipped past it too fast, but we just got a number 11 in there. So this is where, instead of doing math.random, you do math.floor. Because remember, this is a special way of rounding a number where it only rounds down instead of up. So math.round will round up or down depending on where, which integer it's closest to. Math.floor will always round down. So this would actually solve the problem the way I wrote it, but the way I intended to write it, which is a random integer between 1 and 10 inclusive, this would be the way to do it. So the math.round is surrounding the whole thing as up here, but instead of doing math. Wait a sec, no, I'm doing this the wrong way here. Floor goes out here. Okay, that is it. So instead of rounding up or down, you always round down. and then you can add the 1 to it. Okay. Glad I managed to get through that one. I think I got thrown off by realizing that I asked the question wrong. I worded it wrong. So other than the zaniness at the end there, any questions about any of this stuff here? Okay, let me get this recording stopped here.